This video is of the 2019 big bike ride through this map, taking 9 days up through Arizona and spending a lot of time in southwestern Utah. Left Simi Valley and spent time riding through the San Gabriel Mountains, through some fog north of Los Angeles, got up through the fog line near Big Bear, and made our way through the forest areas near Big Bear Lake. We had Mike and Sean Eason, Zach Bell, Greg Stevens, Dave Bushwick, James Blackwell, and myself. Zach had come from Australia, a friend of the Easons, and was riding Mike's old blue GS there in the foreground. And then Mike was riding his Africa Twin. This is some forest that had been burned there, and now we're headed back down the back side or the north side of Big Bear into the high desert, and spent the night in Needles, where the Eason family was doing some boat racing on the Colorado River. So this is day 2 after some camping. There's Needles there in the background, Needles Mountain Range into Arizona. And then we cut north heading towards the Grand Canyon. We camped there the second night on the south rim and just took some U.S. forest trails just south of the south rim. So this is just a couple miles away from the Grand Canyon itself. And we were going through open range, so we had to open and close the cattle gates. Really beautiful weather. We didn't have any rain the entire trip, and then camped here the second night, and then had a nice dinner at the south rim of the Grand Canyon. Had a nice steak meal at the Arizona Steakhouse, and picked up some firewood and camped. That was night 2. And then this is day 3, driving along the south rim, and see the wind blowing pretty hard there with the cloud cover. Really beautiful, beautiful day. Now we're headed on day 3, making our way to the Monument Valley area. This is the beginning of Monument Valley. Spectacular rock formations. And we would camp at the Valley of the Gods area, another dry camping night. So this is Monument Valley. This is a part of the Navajo reservation, and it got really windy and dusty down here. Zach has shown on the inset there, airing down the tire. This is our first major dirt area. Got into some sand down here. You can see the wind blowing. It's pretty nasty. It's super deep sand here. A little trickier with all the heavy camping gear on the back of the bike, making it just a little more challenging. Really neat rock formations. This is kind of a loop road that we were experiencing as we made our way back up outside of the Navajo range, and then back up north to find our campsite. So this is crossing the Arizona state line. This is actually in the area where they filmed the movie Vacation with Chevy Chase. You can see those rock formations there. This is the San Juan River in Mexican Hat, north of the state line, and then we turned off after getting gas and firewood into the Valley of the Gods Road. This is a really cool area. You can see me turning around here to check to see that the firewood and beer that's stacked on the back of the bike is still there after some bumps. That's Mike in front of me. And we're on a mission to search for a campground here. We thought we could camp by this river. It's obviously a dry wash. The sun was going down, so the rock formations are really, really beautiful. We wanted to camp up in this higher elevation, but it was a little bit too windy, and that's what we were searching for here. So we just kept looking and enjoyed the scenery. Found this spot down by the dry creek bed, and got unpacked, set up camp. It was pretty windy. My tent there is in the inset, full of dust the next morning. And then the video here is switched over to the next morning with the sunrise on the rocks, so really nice. We drive out the next morning on our way up the switchbacks, and are now heading up towards the mountain ranges south of Moab. Really a beautiful switchback road. You can actually drive on this. This is actually a state highway, so they maintain it pretty well. It's just neat scenery. And we made our way up to the mountain range. This is Bears Ears, those 2 mountain ranges up ahead, and we're now approaching the 9,000 foot elevation range. But this is the in the Monte La Salle forest area south of Moab. So we climbed up on this beautiful trail
and go through some of the national forest and end up over the near the National Bridges Monument area. This area here, the trees are starting to change. It's called Dark Canyon Wilderness as we look off to the left here. Just beautiful. As we climb up, we're approaching 10,000 feet elevation here, so this is just really nice upper meadows. The trees are starting to change. Stopping here for lunch. Typically have a power bars or trail mix or a package of tuna or something to snack on. And we continue around the mountain range and continue to climb. This is approaching again 10,000 feet. Took a picture there of Sean, and that's how I hold my phone on the bike. There's the actual picture of that mountain. But you see here the sand. Watch that bike get pretty squirrely. Managed to keep it upright by looking ahead and on the throttle and standing up. But in prior days of my riding career, that would not have gone so well. Here's Mike. He found one of James's bungee cords, so that became a bit of a joke throughout the trip. He lost a few of those. So we stopped for snacks and continued on around the mountain. Beautiful trees changing. Basically, these are just fire roads, gravel, never a guardrail. So you got to be careful as you drive through here. For traffic, you might see a four-wheeler or a motorcycle or a deer jump out or a cow or something. You kind of get mesmerized by all this. You still have to continue to pay attention. These are aspen trees up in the higher elevations. Just beautiful foliage here. And now we're approaching a place called Abajo Peak, the same mountain range, but up pretty high elevation still. We're making our way around and over this mountain range, ending up down in Monticello, Utah. So this trail was probably 2 or 3 hours of riding, and it gets up pretty higher in the exposed areas. We're above the tree line here, so you can see it start to thin out. We get over the top, 9,500 feet on my GPS there, and come over the crest of the mountain, and you see the mountain gets kind of rocky there up on top where the trees have a hard time maintaining themselves. So we, if you look carefully at some of these videos, you can see some of the guys down below. I'm in the lead here, and then we finally came over the ridge and I'm going down the hill to the main highway down by Monticello. And there's the windmills north of Monticello, and there's the guys queued up before we head down for gas. From here, we're heading back north to Moab. Here's the neat place where some people are doing some rappelling. And in the inset there, we stopped at a riding store to pick up some gloves, I think it was, and stayed at this place called the Atomic Motel. Beautiful 70s or earlier look. And this is the next morning. Check out this deer in the back of these guys' 4x4. So it's a quick transition. We've actually slept overnight there in the motel, left all of our bags, and now we're heading down on a full-day trip into the White Rim Trail, which goes through Canyonlands National Park. So this is southwest of Moab, and this trail is about 75 miles long, and it's doable in one day on a motorcycle. It would take a Jeep all day, maybe even a couple days to get through here, but we can go a little faster. This is the border of Canyonlands Park. There's mountain bikers in here. They take probably 3 days to go through, and there's hikers that hike some of the trails up on the mountains. It's a pretty severe trail if it gets muddy, but fortunately it was dry here, so just more scenic and really beautiful. It's a maintained trail. This is actually in the national park. There's James coming around the corner. Sean's right behind me. And we're going along the Green River here. So this is an area where the Green River comes out of Idaho from up north, and then the Colorado River joins it from Colorado and meets up in this park just south of where we are here. So again, we kind of meet up and make sure everybody's okay and have a snack and then continue on. This took all day. We had breakfast and then went here directly and got back just before sunset. So it was a pretty big day. 75 miles in the park plus probably 10 or 15 each way to get back and forth from the hotel. So it's a big full day ride. So we couldn't linger too long. Good light technical riding. Going around these corners, there's the Green River. I'm actually leaning a little bit. The bike is actually on the trail. It looks pretty scary where my helmet actually is. GoPro is on my helmet. So it is 8 feet or 7 feet above the ground, maybe, probably 8. So the bike isn't necessarily directly below me. It's going to be a little deceiving. There's some different landscapes. I think that's Greg Stevens coming down the hill, I think, behind me there on the red bike. Still the Green River ahead. So we got permits for this park ahead of time, and it turns out a little bit later on you'll see the park ranger actually checked our permits. It's free to come in, but they limit the number of people that are allowed in the park. So that worked out well, and we were able to really enjoy it. So we took our bags off the bikes. Here's the gang here: Greg, James, myself, Mike, and Dave, Zach, and Sean from left to right. Stop in places like this for lunch. I'm a little more nervy sometimes standing on the edge here taking some video. It's probably nearly 1,000 feet down there, and then the upper ridge is at least 1,000 feet above us, so it's a little bit like the Grand Canyon, but you can ride through here and get down below the lip, so that's why it's really a neat place. There's one of the bike outfitters, and you see 2 or 3 of those come in. Some dirt bike riders occasionally in here, and we got the big bikes. They can go a little faster than us, but all good. So we took the bags off, and that allows us to navigate some of these trails just a little bit easier without so much weight. So we stayed overnight twice in that hotel, 2 nights, and then took off the next morning. We ride right along the edge here. This is all hard rock, sandstone, and granite, I suppose. And in some areas there's actually no trail. There's just markings by rocks to indicate where the trail's supposed to be, and you ride on this edge. So it's and here's Zach trying to open a can of tuna for lunch. There's some sandy trails. Most of it's hard pack and rock. It's fairly easy to navigate. Here's an area where this is rocky, right along the edge. This is the road. So we're right along the edge. Easily 1,000-foot drop here, and just spectacular. You got to pay attention. You can't be gawking over the edge. You want to keep the momentum going so the bike doesn't get funky and lose its balance. So really, there's a dirt biker past us. There's a couple guys behind us. They can go a little quicker, and just keeps on going. 75 miles of this, and just never gets old. We've done this trail a couple of years in a row, and when I first did this, I was not much of a rider. I had great difficulty in some of these rocks, but it's getting a lot easier now. Most of these trails we had mapped out in a track that we wanted to go on each day, so we had a general plan. I had that in my GPS and in my phones for backup, and then we didn't have to spend too much time navigating. That's Greg there. James is standing. There's Zach on Mike's blue GS. There's Dave, I think that was. So there's the park ranger checking our permits, and an intermediate point. She actually walked down here from the ranger station from someplace, and then the trail continued back down into the next section. So the first section is the Green River, and then this next leg goes along the Colorado as we get closer to the edge, and we'll see that a little bit later. But this looks a little bit more like the Grand Canyon in the type of rock formation.
That's how you do it.
And
Is that ridiculous?
that's, I suppose, because of the way the Colorado carved it. So we'll see more of the Colorado coming up. Would not want to be down here when it rains. But on a day like this, it's pretty spectacular. And this is one, we can see a rock formation in the inset that's called the Washerwoman. You can see it off in the distance. It's kind of a neat formation. I actually missed the road here, so as you look to the right, you'll actually see the road. There it is. I totally missed this and had to ride through it. I think James actually got in that sand and lost it in the soft stuff, but
Yeah, it was. I drove
actually
right
wasn't paying attention. We both missed the road. So
Wow.
this is one of our favorite places to go. I've done this a couple of years, as I said, and probably end up, here's the Colorado down in there somewhere. Probably end up going up north to Idaho at a later time. We've actually done this trail a couple of times. There's Sean. There's James on the right, the gang on the left, the park ranger in the middle, and me on the right. And then this trail exits through a bunch of switchbacks back up towards the Moab area. We typically ate breakfast, a big breakfast at a restaurant, except the dry camping days. and that fills us up. Then a light snack for lunch that's on the bike, and then a bigger dinner. Sometimes at camp, but we end up having, there's a breakfast here. End up having a bigger dinner to fill us up. And this is the next day along the Colorado River. There's my GPS on my phone navigating us. And we went up northeast, pretty close to the Colorado line here. And we are going along the Onion River back up into the mountain range and end up going to cross the Colorado state line. So this is really fun. But as soon as we got in here, this is Sean in front, James next, then me. My boots aren't waterproof. I don't think Sean's were either. They got wet, so once they get wet, you might as well have fun. So we blew through all these river crossings. There's probably 20 of them, and had a really good time. And then it ends up on the mountain up at higher elevations. This got kind of sandy here. I actually hit a rut and stopped. You see, I just slowed down here. James hit that exact same spot and went over the handlebars here. You can see him demonstrating his technique. But nobody got hurt. But, sometimes hitting those sandy areas is a surprise at some speed, and if you're not ready for it and standing up, even if you do, sometimes there's a buried rut. So here we start to go up a little higher, open up a cattle gate. This is all open range. You got to shut the gates behind you. And now we're starting to get close to the Colorado state line. We're heading up around Mount Was,
Wow.
WAAS. And a little farther in, we'll get to the Colorado line and end up down in Gateway, Colorado, and fill up with food and gas and water, and make our way eventually back into Utah and stayed at a really neat dude ranch that evening. See a bulldozer there. They do maintain these roads. We're up at probably 7,000 or 8,000 feet here. See the beautiful trees. You'll actually see some snow in the mountain. A couple of years prior, my son Jordan and I crossed over that mountain in the July time frame, but there's actually a little touch of snow on it. You may see in a couple of these videos. And this is in late September, early October. Saw some sheep, saw some turkey, saw quite a few deer, a whole bunch of loose cows. This is an area, if you read the sign there, it's an old uranium mine in Utah, so this is where a lot of the uranium for the power plants in the U.S. and the atomic bombs were mined, and there's warning signs around for that. So we're heading back down in towards Colorado here into Gateway, where we filled up with food and gas. Then back down to a city called Uravan, Colorado, and saw a neat area where the gold miners used to take water from this river, and they built a sluice that's up on the ridge to move water downstream and get it up high in the air. You see an example of it here. And then take a big hose and blast out the ore. It's called hydraulic mining. So that thing was built back in the 1870s, I think it was. Didn't find much gold, but the infrastructure is still there for the old flume where the water went down. So this was the Dolores River, and then we went back into Utah and stayed at this really cool bed ranch place we've been to before called Three Step Hideaway. It's a off-grid place. Scott and Julie there in the upper left made us breakfast and dinner, and had these unheated cabins, and just a fantastic place for bikers to stay. On day 7 then we moved to take the highway back across Lake Powell. So we took the ferry from the south side of Lake Powell here, and it's kind of a neat thing we've always wanted to do. At Hall's Crossing on Highway 276, you board the ferry, they take you up to Bullfrog, and so you take the ferry. It's maybe a 20-minute, 30-minute trip, and my GPS tracking us as we go across the water. Really, really cool. And then we ended up taking the kind of the back dirt roads up along the wash that feeds the reservoir there in Lake Powell, and ended up going up the Burr Canyon Trail and the Burr Switchbacks, which we've been on before. This is a really neat way to get up on top of that ridge. This area is called Capitol Reef, Utah, and it's a very distinctive reef-looking feature across the middle of the state. And we climb back up that through some of these amazing switchbacks. These are the Burr Trail switchbacks. and end up climbing into this canyon called Bird Trail, and then ended up in Escalante that evening and went camping on day whatever day this was. I think this is day 7 and evening 7. So we spent the night in Escalante, and this is on the way to that campground. Beautiful area called the Grand Staircase, and then just did a camping in town in Escalante at this campsite. When I stop, I save my GPS X track, and then later on I can plot that out on the map and save that for next time. So there's the campground. And next day went up into the high elevation in the forest up by Posey Lake Campground, a place called Hell's Gate, or Hell's Backbone, excuse me. And really neat, just beautiful scenery again up in the high alpine meadows. There's myself in the upper left. There's a picture of Zach on the right. That's Sean there as we wait for each other at intersections so we don't lose each other. And as it's confusing for people behind, we put some space. There's some cows here. We put some space in between ourselves because it gets dusty, so you don't want to follow too close. So the lead people have to end up stopping. Beautiful lake. This is Posey Lake Campground. And now we're getting up into the 8, 9, 10,000 foot open meadows. It's fairly cold there. There's 10,500 on my GPS. We run about 60, 65, 70 miles an hour on these trails that are straight. Gotta be careful for deer. And it's a little chilly here, but nice, just open meadow riding up here. And we made our way back down towards Bryce Canyon, back through the Alpines, and had a pretty big day of riding here. We were trying to find a place to stay that night, but it was closer. But we ended up going all the way back through Bryce Canyon, through Duck Creek, and this is actually Bryce here, the back trails of Bryce National Park. I took the guys on a fairly rocky trail here that didn't make me very popular, but we got through the park and back down to the highway. Saw some deer here, but we couldn't find a place to stay, and we didn't want to camp because it was going to be wanted to go on the next day. There's Zach leading, going down the hill towards Hatch, Utah, just outside of Bryce Canyon. So we ended up going all the way through Bryce, all the way through Zion Park, and all the way into St. George, Utah, and ended up spending the night at a hotel. There's a lava field here. It's kind of neat up by northeast of Zion National Park, and this is Navajo Lake. It's kind of a neat lake just west of Duck Creek Village, Utah. So a nice ride down the mountain. This is very close to Zion National Park. If you look off to the right, you can see some of those areas. And then we did go through Zion. This is late afternoon, riding through Zion. Absolutely beautiful national park. And saw some bighorn sheep. Not sure if I've got that in the video here, but just a nice drive. The crowds weren't too bad this late in the day. There's the bighorns up on that rock there. And then just drove through the park and ended up going all the way back down to St. George for that last evening. This is day 8 of the trip. The last day is all highway, leaving St. George and going down south of Las Vegas and down actually before that into Lake Mead rec area. This is Lake Mead, sort of the back way. It's a Sinclair gas station mascot. Really beautiful going by Lake Mead and going through the Joshua Tree Highway here, the solar plant in the distance there. It's all highway driving, so we end up standing up a lot to try to stretch and end up back in Simi Valley. Fantastic 9-day trip with the guys.